Welcome, Kim Silloway, to the Finding Elevation podcast. It's so exciting to have you here. And I would say, back here, we did another recording a couple of years ago, I think after you climbed Everest. So it's fun to kind of regroup and see where you're at today.
It's such a pleasure. I feel like a lot's changed since Everest.
I think a lot has changed on many levels since Everest, yes. We'll get to all of that. I'm always curious about people's origin stories and how you ended up where you are now. So just to sort of set the stage, we started working together. Do you remember when? Not to put you on the spot, but...
You'll have to tell me. Oh my goodness.
Yes, 2018. I literally remember taking your call for the first time. I was sitting in the Fort Lauderdale airport, and my company was so new. I was so excited to have a new client that was a female that was climbing cool things. So that was 2018. You at that point had summited Kilimanjaro, correct?
Yes.
You lived in Washington, D.C., or near in the D.C. area, not one of the known mountainous places in the U.S.
560 feet above sea level.
It's actually better than me in Seattle.
Right.
So you started there, and now I've worked with you to summit multiple 8,000 meter peaks. So how did you get from Kilimanjaro to taking climbing more seriously and climbing bigger and bigger mountains?
Well, just to set the stage, 2018 was our first sort of introduction together. But my introduction to climbing came during what I call my year of yeses, which followed a very raw and emotional ending of a very meaningful long-term relationship. And during that year, I said yes to cool, interesting, fear-provoking adventures. And by the end of the year, there was so much personal growth that I thought to myself, why would I just do this for a year? Why not do this for the second half of my life? And, I ran a long distance running race in a desert. I learned how to play a saxophone. I climbed Kilimanjaro. And that was one of the things that actually got a lot of traction. And I thought, this is pretty cool. Kilimanjaro's very cool. Tanzania is awesome. But I wanted something a little bit more technical, a little bit more physically challenging. And then we met. And you had mentioned that I should improve my skills. And so I took some courses in Seattle, learned how to sort of survive in an alpine environment for a period of time, crevasse rescue. And then, we just started climbing mountains that was commensurate with my abilities. And eventually, our first 8,000 meter peak was Choyo-Yu in Tibet. Yeah. That was amazing, great experience. And having done Everest and K2 and all of your cool adventures, that once you've done one, then you're like, okay, after a month of recovery, you're like, well, what's next? And then we just leapfrogged. We went from there to Everest twice, and then from there, Lhotse, and then from Lhotse to K2.
Which you summited at 60, by the way.
I did. It was on my birthday.
On your birthday.
Yes, in July of 2025. Yeah, July of 2024.
Which makes you the oldest American to summit that peak.
It is.
Incredible.
Yes. And it's been an incredible learning process, starting from the bottom and moving to the top. And a lot has changed. I mean, when I look back at how I trained in 2018, and I'm sure you've looked at my training peaks, to now, it's been a big leap. And I think for me, everyone was looking for the secret sauce and how to train for these mountains. We didn't really fit into a clean and neat category. We weren't trad climbers. We weren't, ski mountaineers. We weren't really, what kind of athletes were we and how do we train? And then, so it's a little bit of trial and error. The greatest advancement was this cognitive leap to ultramarathoning, right? And I thought, that's exactly what we are. We have to train metabolically, we have to train for endurance, we have to have strength. We're doing these huge physical challenges repeatedly day after day without a lot of recovery time. And we're doing this in really challenging environments. And so for me, we borrowed the science and we learned about nutrition and recovery and training. And I think it was transformative for me. And, being a more, an older athlete, the margin for error when it is much, much gets narrower. When you're 20 and 30 years old, you can get away with overtraining, you can get away with junk miles, you can get away with clear mistakes in terms of training. But when you start moving into your 50s and 60s, you just don't have that luxury.
I agree. Yeah, so if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and you're listening to this, please enjoy every moment, because when you get to be 50, I will say exactly what Kim said. There's just less margin for error when it comes to training and recovery and nutrition and sleep. All those things have to be so much more dialed, I think, as I'll say, mature, experienced athlete.
On the other hand, if you're in your 20s and 30s, you probably have family responsibilities, kid responsibilities, work responsibilities. And so there's a lot of pressure to optimize your training and leverage that. So I think there's a lot to be learned, even if you're in your 20s and 30s as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. And maybe there's not one thing. What's on the short list of things for you that really transformed your training or your fitness?
There's a list of things, right? Every workout has to have an intention, right? One of the challenges is staying mentally disciplined. If you are in zone 2 training, you do zone 2 training. If you're doing max heart rate interval work, then you've got to do max heart interval work. So easy days are easy, hard days are hard, and staying in those parameters. That's really important. I think from a volume standpoint, we're layering on volume training sessions for a cumulative volume. And what I've learned is I need to get to the edge of the bucket, and right before falling in, pulling back so you have a chance to recover. So periodization training, I think, is really important, and it builds in a guardrail for those of us that are all type A's and we want to smash every workout, we want to kill it. And then the zone 2 is interesting. I used to think the more zone 2, the better. But after a couple years of doing this type of training, you become super efficient. I think the mistake for beginners is you think, well, I'll give you an example. The ultramarathon runners who run 200 miles for their event, you don't practice running 200 miles. What you're doing is you're training yourself metabolically, physically, nutritionally, recovering wise, so that you are capable of doing your 200-mile event. So 17-hour days doing zone 2 is just all you're doing is adding wear and tear, and you're increasing your chance for injury. So I think it's important to focus, as you do in Training Peaks when you're training your athletes, Lisa, is just really dial in on the zone 2, yes, on the strength, yes, speed, yes, endurance, yes, but in bite-sized pieces.
Yes.
So, the volume and the cumulative time on feet, you got to really stay dialed into that, especially as an older athlete. And then from a recovery standpoint, a lot of science has changed. Recovery looks different for everybody, but it's so critical because that's where you get the training benefit. The gain is during your recovery. So stretching might be foundation, might be body work, like sports massage, it might be plunging, whatever that looks like. But that recovery, I have come to recognize, as much as I hate to admit that I need recovery.
I love this because I remember years ago, I would always schedule a recovery day and Kim would never do it.
It just felt like I have the time. I need to, it's just a constant drive. And really what I'm finding is I have to pull myself back, and that's really more beneficial. It allows your muscles to recover and, again, reduce injury and wear and tear.
Yep.
The supplement world is another big change. Everyone has their own secret sauce, but I'm, particularly on these long expeditions, I think bringing protein supplements, protein powders is key. For me, recovery amino acids are key. I love magnesium, helps with sleep, reduces cramps. I'm into the collagen and greens occasionally because, again, on these long expeditions, there's going to be holes in your nutrition during the month and a half that you're there just because balanced diet is just not available. I find that those have been pretty beneficial as well.
I think this is a really good pro tip. So what do you take with you in terms of supplements for an gym?
So first thing is hydrate. So we'll start with hydration. Everybody, it depends on how much sugar and salt you want in your particular hydration, but I definitely bring all of hydration, assuming I'm going to have between 3 and 5 liters of fluid a day, except for on summit day where, you can keep 1 liter in that. Again, I do like, particularly in Nepal, to take collagen. Protein sources aren't as available as they are, for example, in Pakistan. I will take protein powders we discussed, amino acids for sure to help with recovery, and then the greens. Like at least once a week. Helps with the immune system as well, just trying to keep you healthy while you're in maybe not the best environment.
Your gut also, it's good to have those
Oh,
grains.
I do bring charcoal as well if things seem a little dicey. From a nutritional standpoint, yeah, the last thing you need is. Oh, and I also bring bouillon cubes, and I do that in the event, by God's grace. Only one of my expeditions did I get a tough GI, situation and just maintaining fluids. It was just sort of something that was
Yeah,
a way to.
good idea. I actually haven't done that. Bring bouillon. That's a really easy way to quickly get some good electrolytes on board.
Called.
I love it. Okay, so you climbed Kilimanjaro, Mare Peak, you went to Choyu, you went to Everest, and on Everest, your first attempt, you decided, I'm going to turn around.
Yes. So
I think this decision making, this is so critical. Like this summer, I've had the privilege really to work with a lot of people who are new to mountaineering and to mentor many of them. And what I've noticed is that it takes time to develop decision making, both to know this is too far, but also to know I'm just uncomfortable and the weather's going to switch or we're going to get around this face and we're going to be out of the wind and it's okay to push for an hour to get to that point. So I'd love to talk through if you can take us back to that decision on Everest and what played into that and what ultimately made you decide that the best course of action for you was to turn around.
I'm going to do you one better because K2, 2 attempts on K2, there's the group decision where usually the head guide will make a decision about when we're going to move up the mountain and sort of our movements on the mountain. And so, full stop, I will follow the decision of the leader. But you have an opportunity to make personal decisions along the way. And when you're inexperienced, it's really hard when to know if a situation is scary versus you being scared.
Yes.
And those are two very separate things, but both of them have to be respected. And in terms of making decisions about moving forward through your fear, I always say courage is not the lack of fear, it's moving forward, embracing fear. And so it takes experience and time to get good at making decisions. There's no hack, there's no secret formula, there's no podcast that's going to,
There's no app.
there's no app that's going to make you bulletproof in terms of decision making. And I talk about decision making. There's some really what I call decision traps that you need to avoid. But just briefly, to bring this to real life, I'm going to talk about K2. The season was rough right from the get-go. My first attempt on K2, it seemed that the monsoon was coming in early. And for those people who don't climb in those kind of environments, the weather is going to determine when the season is done, and that is the monsoon. So, water comes in from the Arabian Sea. As it comes up to elevation, it starts dumping snow. The problem with a ton of snow is that it makes it difficult to climb in, but it also increases avalanche risk. The slopes are absolutely loaded with snow. I did our acclimatization rotations, and then we decide we come down, as we always do on mountains, and make a decision about a weather window. And our weather window, you're looking for 4 or 5 days that are decent. We saw our weather window really closing down to it went from 3 days to 1 day to a couple of hours. It wasn't great, but we thought maybe if we can just climb through some bad weather through Camp 1 and Camp 2, maybe we'll be in position if the weather shifts to move forward up the mountain. And it really was a rough evening, really heavy wind, a lot of snow, and, there was a bit of information siloing, which was difficult because communication was difficult between teams, between tents. We were just totally drilled down into our tents. Our team whittled down to a smaller team, but at that point, there were 3 of us, and I just said, I'm not feeling great about this. I have hit my sort of risk tolerance with this. I was really concerned with avalanches, and I just made the decision. I just made the call. I'm going down. And listen, best of luck to you guys. As it turns out, I got down to base camp, and as it turns out, my team advanced. There was a series of 3 avalanches. By God's grace, none of my teammates were hurt or injured, but everybody, all of the teams turned around and came down. And for a couple of hours, I was wondering, geez, did I read the tea leaves wrong? I was looking at the weather. I was looking at the precipitation. I was looking at the wind. I was trying to I was like, how did I make such a mistake after a year of training and oh my God, did I make a mistake? I had some solitude that was just difficult. Those couple of hours in base camp alone were difficult.
Well, I
But
think
like
it's natural to second guess, right? Like I've
my
been around
second
before and
thing,
you're like,
my team finally returned. I was so thankful. My team returned camp, and as did all the other expedition teams. But I guess my point is that when it comes to decision making, you have to set in your mind, you have to be crystal clear about your risk tolerance. And everybody's risk tolerance is different. For me personally, in business, whether it's business or whether it's mountain climbing, there's a stopgap, there's a kill switch, there's a turnaround time. There's a
mhm.
really clear, like, I'm not going to climb in winds greater than 45 miles an hour. You have to have really clear risk tolerances and stick to it. I think that's number one. Number two, I think another big decision trap is this perception of sunk costs. We've all had teammates. They're in the tent and they're like, oh my God, I sold my car.
I
I
mortgaged my
I quit
house.
I quit my job. I got a second mortgage on my house. I've got to go for the summit. And that, unfortunately, is a decision trap. And, as humans, our aversion to loss, the emotional impact is super powerful. It's twice as strong as success. So it really plays on us. And then the next decision trap is an escalation of commitment. You're like, okay, well, the weather's bad. We're gonna skip camp 2. We're gonna go from camp 1 to camp 3. It's just all of this I call them decision traps, and they can really lead to some mistakes. So I think it's important, one, making personal decisions is important before you leave, before you start climbing. And number two, not to fall into these decision traps. Just make the best decisions you can. It's very hard, especially when, for example, the Russians, they're leaving camp and you're going, their risk tolerance is different, right? It's summit or die trying to summit. And that's a different risk tolerance for a lot of other folks, myself included. I'd rather just come back. The mountain's going to be there next year, come back the following year. That's my sort of philosophy. And so when it all comes down to it, the best decisions I've ever made are the decisions not to climb. As much as I'd love to climb, the best decisions.
Because that assures that you're going to return safely.
It's heartbreaking. You've asked your family to sacrifice, you missed some soccer games, you've missed some meetings at work, you're disappointed your spouse. I mean, there's so much of a sunk cost with this that can all really kind of contribute to maybe not the best decisions.
And I'm curious your process. I agree with having these sort of preset guardrails as you go into a climb that like I'm not going to exceed this style of climbing or this level of risk. Are those just inherent in you, or do you find yourself like in the moment? Because what I tend to do is evaluate the likelihood of something happening and the consequence of that thing happening. So I could be on a slope that's loaded, that looks avalanche prone. And in that case, I think the likelihood of an avalanche is high and the consequence is also very high. And so that would be beyond my level of risk. I could also be climbing where there's a lot of exposure and the consequence of something happening is great. I could fall and die, but the likelihood of that happening is actually relatively low because I'm on a fixed line, I have a backup, I'm skilled at moving on that type of terrain. So is it for you, do you find yourself sort of continually evaluating and measuring against certain things? Or is it just that you inherently know, like, nope, you just have this feeling, this is beyond what I'm comfortable with?
I'm a little bit more analytical like you are. I do listen to my gut. The older I get, the more acute my ability to discern those kind of things, which is, we're talking about discerning. The third question I ask myself, so you're asking risk, you're assessing loss. I also say to myself is, there are people who take risks that get away with it and they don't know they've gotten away with it. And it just has worked out. That sort of, hope for me is not a strategy. It's something to be really cautious with. And you and I both know there's some people out there who are right on the edge, who, yes, they're highly skilled, yes, they're fit, but yes, they're also getting away with stuff. And
Absolutely.
I'm not willing to get away with stuff.
Yeah.
And, I really am risk averse. I overcome fear, but I'm always going to be risk averse.
I find when I say that to friends who aren't climbers, they're like, how can you be risk adverse when you pursue these risky things in the mountains? And I think that what they don't understand is that we've built a lot of safety mechanisms into the way that we climb, and it actually is relatively safe. And to your point, when you've developed the discernment to be able to say whether something is outside of your tolerance or not, we actually are in pretty safe situations. not to say that accidents don't happen, but I think we are experienced enough to make sure that we've done everything we can to be as safe as possible.
We do. I do think we also have to put ourselves against think. Like somehow it feels safer if everybody else is doing it. It must be safe. You have to be aware. It's just an awareness. It's always nice to have either somebody like yourself or myself in a group because we're going to be the ones that go, "What? Well, okay, not so fast.
Right.
Is there a better way to do this?"
Yeah. So you went back to K2 the following year,
Yes.
which was 2024. Talk us through how that went. What stands out to you? What did you learn that particular climb?
That mountain feels to me like a really different mountain. It has so many potential risks. It just seems like it's so vertical and there's so much rockfall and it's really hard and it's there aren't really any easy sections. Some that are easier than others and the weather can change on a dime because of the geography of where it is. All of those elements are sort of algorithmic in terms of
Yeah.
their cumulative challenge. And it's a beautiful mountain. It is so spectacular in so many ways. And I just feel so privileged and grateful that I was able to climb that mountain. Going to the Gilkey Memorial before
Yeah.
climb, really powerful. I stood there and I looked at, for those people who are watching this and maybe unfamiliar, there's this really powerful area not too far from base camp that was created to memorialize people who had passed away either attempting or having summited K2 and come down and unfortunately perished. And the volume and the number of people that have attempted this mountain and passed away is stunning. And these are the best mountaineers in the world coming from every country that you can imagine. And suddenly you're standing there going, this isn't just another mountain. This is the mountain. And it was really powerful. And so it makes the accomplishment of climbing it and coming down safely, it just feels so powerful. And I feel so privileged to have done it and done it safely. And as you know, Lisa, my faith is very important to me. And it was really integral in attempting this mountain. So it's a beautiful mountain. My experience with the people of Pakistan was amazing. They are some of the best human beings on the planet. And it was just I feel very fortunate.
I agree. Intentionally didn't go to the Gilkey Memorial when I climbed K2 because I thought it would be too difficult to sort of sit there amongst all these memorials to people who had died doing exactly what I'm preparing to do. I instead went there. I was fortunate to go back to K2 the year after I summited to help guide some people to base camp, and I went then. And it is just such a powerful, like, reverent place to sit there amongst all these memorials to climbers who've passed away. And I think it also helped put in perspective what we're doing and the consequences potentially of pursuing what we love. If you're climbing K2, I highly recommend visiting there and just to me, it was important to pay some respect to the people who had led the way. And we all, I'm sure you and other people listening have like consumed all of those mountaineering stories, right? Since the beginning, since the 50s. And we learn from those situations and those accidents. And it has ultimately, hopefully, made us a stronger community. So I think it's important to study and understand those as we all continue to learn.
I agree with you, Lisa. And I think the other aspects is I love representing the United States. There's nothing better than standing on the summit and being able to raise the flag for the States. I know in Europe, mountain climbing is more of a major sport than it is in the US, but it's still, I don't think mountaineering gets recognized much in the United States as compared to other sports. I'm very proud to be an American and standing on top of K2. There's only been 40 of us.
Is that right? That's the number currently, 40?
Yeah, and we have sent 10 times that many people to outer space. It doesn't even register. And then for those of us that are females, there's only 9 of us living. Actually, we may have lost another this last week, a female. But the number now is 9 of us Americans. And that is I just am so grateful to be a part of the women that are badasses that have done that. And yourself, you were one of the first, 4 or 5 women to do it from the U.S.
I was the second woman from the U.S. to summit. I was always admired Wanda from Poland. I will get her last name wrong, but I will link her in the bio, who walked to K2 base camp with a broken leg. And I just like, you know how hard that trek is, right? It's not like trekking in the Khumbu Valley where there's pretty well-worn paths that
Brutal.
people have used for centuries. This is like every kind of rock you can imagine. You're walking on a dry glacier for the last few days. It's brutal. And thinking about her doing that as a woman who, I mean, she was so badass and hardcore, like unbelievably. But then she had a broken leg. She's like, I'm just still going to walk to base camp.
I mean, who does that? I mean,
She does.
it's an amazing woman. Just the courage, the
Yeah.
strength of dude. It's amazing. And you were the second U.S. woman to do it. How?
Yeah, which I just feel fortunate about. You know, I had, as I said, read everything I could about that mountain and the people who had gone before me and knew the, you know, the odds and the chances of not surviving and of not summiting. And I, just to go back to what you said, Kim, about having these sort of preset guardrails before you climb, I had told myself I had to let go of summiting that mountain and, you know, achieving some sort of notoriety from that and instead just focus on two things, which were that I was going to do my best every day and I was never going to climb above my ability. And I felt like if I stayed true to both of those things, then whatever happened was going to be great. And it really relieved me a lot of this like pressure to get to the summit. I just, you know, I was going to, we say, climb your mountain. Like that's exactly what I was going to do. And that's all that mattered. And those things really guided me in the decisions that I made on the mountain. And yeah, we'll just forever feel grateful that it worked out the way that it did.
When you step off that mountain, you're just grateful. Unlike any other mountain, there's a different feeling of race stepping off that mountain. I just remember looking back at it and just kneeling with gratitude and thanking the mountain for allowing me to come down safely.
Absolutely. And I think you were alluding to this. I feel like mountains have sort of a vibe or personality. And like Everest to me feels very just sort of welcoming and like, you know, peaceful. There's like this
Yes,
peaceful undertone to Everest. And
yes.
I felt like K2 was like, get the fuck off of me. Like, no, like welcoming, like, I'm glad you're here. It was just like, girl, you don't even know what you're getting into.
I got 99 ways to kill you. And it is a unrelenting brutalness. I don't know. It's a hum in the background that you're just aware of the whole
Yeah.
time you're climbing.
I'm curious, what made you say yes to that mountain? Going back to your year of yeses, what was it that attracted you to that peak?
To K2,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's just intriguing. I think the fact that so few people have done it, so few
Yeah.
women have done it, so few Americans have done it, it's sort of the proving ground. You know, I forget who said this, but when you've summited Everest, in the eyes of the world, you're a mountaineer. But when you've summited K2, you are a mountaineer in the eyes of other mountaineers.
I love that.
And it's so true. It is, yeah. Well, the best mountaineers in the world go to K2 to climb.
Right. So a couple of things. I looked back at our notes from when we started working together in 2018, and I always ask, like, how can I coach you? How do you want to benefit from our coaching relationship? And one of your things was confident. And so I'm just curious, Kim, because I have seen you change over these years that we've worked together. From your perspective, how has your confidence grown and how has that influenced how you climb?
My competency has gotten better. I never want to get confident. Uh,
Oh, okay.
so I feel like my competency has gotten better in many ways, you know, not just training, although I feel pretty good about my fitness. You know, competence in decision making, competence in gear, competence in the mental game. These expeditions are really long, and it's so easy to get down in the dumps, or if you get a little sick, get a little homesick. If
Yep.
you know, there's all these factors, and you have to learn how to navigate through them and the isolation. I mean, you know, you just have to learn how to navigate through those challenges. And I think what you've done is, at least for me during our training, is pointed that out that these things are going to happen. Expect them. You have provided a way to sort of work through them, and it allowed me to gain some confidence in all of those areas. I don't rely on confidence. It doesn't serve me, and it could really put me at risk. So I'm just more comfortable being competent.
I like that distinction. I think that's really important. I'm probably going to steal that from you.
It's the same in surgery. You never want to get too confident when you're doing well as a surgeon. You don't want to get too confident as
Hmm.
a surgeon. There's always something that could happen, and it's good to be prepared for all of those potential issues. I think you gain some competency and some comfort by being aware of those things. But when you're a young surgeon, for example, you don't know the bad things that can happen. So you're not fearless, but you don't have the same level of respect for bad outcomes. And in fact, the more experienced and the better you get and the more capable you become a little bit more conservative, and you're more aware of some of these potential issues that could pop up. At the end of the day, you have helped me become very competent in so many different areas. And a lot of those things, had it not been for you sort of pointing it out, I would have never even considered going into some of these expeditions. Like, aside from your eagle eyes when it comes to my training peaks, you're always following every like thinking, I'm going to outsmart Lisa. I'm going to run this faster than I should. And then you're like, Tim, I noticed I'm beat. But some of the mental stuff and mental preparing for going on these expeditions, I credit all of that to you.
My pleasure. I feel like I just sort of provide suggestions. It's up to athletes to, take that. And you certainly have been just a student of mountaineering. It's been fun to watch you like grow from having, summited Kilimanjaro to now being competent at climbing 8,000-meter peaks, and just hearing you talk about them. I'm just like, oh, Kim has just grown so much since we started working together. It's really fun to be a part of that. I'm curious if you have specific mindset tools or processes that you follow to help you get into the right mindset when you're on a mountain.
I think a lot of that starts before I leave and getting super dialed in, getting my gear packed weeks ahead or at least organized a week ahead. There's no panic. It's very mindful, but it is just sort of buttoning up everything at home, saying what has to be said to friends and loved ones, going and then really just, I'm probably pretty good at compartmentalizing, but just focusing on the task at hand. Every
Right.
day, saying to myself, how can I optimize staying healthy, staying strong, mentally cued in, gear wise, making sure that there's no mistakes, that it's methodical every day. And it's a practice, it's a mindset. The other thing is I also like looking after teammates. At every point during an expedition, you're going to have maybe a day. Each person in the expedition is going to just have a bad day. And they're just, you're just a wreck for a day and then you're okay. But it's that supportiveness comes back to you. You support others that you when you're having your bad day. But
Yeah.
also, that's sort of the last piece is sort of looking after others. And I think it's very helpful because it makes you feel connected. And so, yeah, I don't know if I have a particular mindset, but it's a very intense, deep focus. And it doesn't stop until I am sitting on the plane going home, staying in the groove for that entire time.
And you are getting ready to test your competence in those skills again with some more 8,000-meter peaks. What are you up to next?
Yes. So the plan was Shishapangma in Tibet. Shortly thereafter, we'll go to Nepal to Manaslu. Then I'll come home. Then it will be Makalu in March, and then Broad Peak in G2 in July of 2026. So that's the hope. And as well as I do, you plan, and it just things happen, borders close, mountains close, epidemics happen. You never know, and you train and you're ready to go when the opportunity arises. And so that's the tentative plan. We'll see what actually happens.
Do you have any intentions around these mountains? I always feel like generally there's something I want to learn when I climb a mountain or some way I want to grow or push myself. I'm curious if you have any intentions.
So curiosity, I only climb the mountains that I'm curious about. And curiosity is my driving factor. In Pakistan, I really want to do G2. Very few people do it. It's intriguing to me. Broad Peak is so close to base camp. Why not? I mean, that makes sense to do. I might consider doing a mountain without oxygen. I think that would be a really interesting, curious attempt. We'll see if that happens. My original goal was I wanted to climb an 8,000-meter peak in China, in Nepal, and Pakistan, and that's been accomplished. So anything that happens after that is just gravy for me.
I think when you go in with that kind of perspective that I'm just curious, I know I'm not here to prove anything. I'm like settled with my risk tolerance. We're just going to see what happens. To me, that's when amazing things happen.
Who knows? I mean, good things happen. Great things can happen beyond your wildest dreams if you're open to it.
And it's that openness. Like now we're getting away from mountains a little bit, but we can only dream what we know to be true in our little minds. And there's so much more available, so many more opportunities out there. And being open to wherever life, the mountains are going to take you, that's where it's at. Awesome. Well, anything you want to close with or share? Anything we didn't talk about that you want to make sure people know?
The only thing I want to end on is my eternal gratefulness for you and what you've done for me, because mountaineering has been transformative in my life, and the people that I've met, the places that I've been, the beauty, the jaw-dropping,
Yep.
awe-inspiring joy that I have found in mountains and have all come true because you were willing to take somebody who had zero experience, clueless. I mean, I might have been kind of fit, but outside of that, totally clueless. Honestly, a little intimidated, maybe felt like I didn't belong in the mountaineering world. And you were this woman who had summited Everest and K2, and you were willing to extend your arms out and say, no, you can be a part of this team.
Aw.
And I'm going to teach you how to do it. And I'm going to teach you what I learned, what I had to work hard, that I'm willing to share with people. And that opened the door for me, and it's transformed my life, and I'm so grateful for you, and I really appreciate what you do.
Well, thank you. It means a lot to me to hear you say that, and it's even cooler for me to like see it paying forward and like see you growing and learning and sharing. And to me, that's just it's about making our community a better and a safer place. So you're a big part of that, Kim. Thank
And
you.
a welcoming community, and you've done so much with your expeditions, your all women's groups, and that's got a different energy and a different vibe. It's welcoming, and you're transforming so many other people's lives. So thank you. I'll say thank you from all of us.
Thank you.